Most people think saving a life is heroic. In Ilara Vance's case, it was a death sentence. It started with a bill at table 4. The man in the suit was Lorenzo Moretti, the most dangerous man in New York, and the man behind him was cleaning a suppressor under a napkin. She had 3 seconds. She didn't scream. She didn't drop a plate. She took her red pen and circled 7 letters on the receipt. Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now. That piece of paper didn't just save a crime boss, it started a war, and she was right in the middle of it. The rain in New York doesn't wash the city clean, it just makes the grime slicker. That's how it felt inside the Obsidian that Tuesday night. The restaurant was dimly lit, smelling of expensive truffles, old leather, and quiet desperation. Her name was Ilara Vance. She had been a waitress there for 3 years. It was the kind of place where politicians ate with their mistresses, and hedge fund managers laundered their guilt with $1,000 bottles of wine. She had learned to be invisible. She learned that if she kept her head down and her ears open, she survived. But tonight was different. It was 9:15 p.m. when he walked in. Lorenzo Moretti. Even if one didn't follow the crime columns, they knew the face. Sharp jawline, eyes the color of burnt espresso, and a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than Ilara's father's entire life earnings. He didn't walk like a man who owned the room. He walked like he owned the building and everyone breathing inside it. He sat at table 4, the booth in the far corner. It offered a view of the door but shielded his back against the mahogany paneling. Or so he thought. Sparkling water. Double espresso. Keep the kitchen open, he said. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of emotion. Of course, Mr. Moretti, Ilara said, keeping her eyes on the tablecloth. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere shifted. The air pressure dropped. A man entered. He was unremarkable in every way. Beige trench coat, damp umbrella, receding hairline. He looked like an accountant who had missed his train. He asked for a table for one. The hostess, new and naive, seated him at table 5. Table 5 was directly behind table 4, separated only by a waist-high partition and a fake ficus plant. Ilara was at the POS station, punching in an order for table 7, when she saw it. The accountant shifted in his seat. He placed his umbrella on the floor, but he didn't pick up the menu. He reached into his coat. It was a subtle movement. To anyone else, he was reaching for a wallet or a phone. But Ilara grew up in a house where checking for exits was a bedtime ritual. Her father was a gambler who owed money to people who didn't believe in forgiveness. She knew what a drawer looked like. The man's hand lingered near his ribs. He turned his head slightly, checking the reflection in the dark window. Then she saw the reflection of the gun. A Glock 19 with an extended barrel, threaded for a suppressor. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Lorenzo Moretti was on his phone, scrolling through messages, looking bored. He was completely exposed. If she shouted, the gunman would fire instantly. If she dropped a tray, the gunman might panic and spray the room. She had to be invisible. She had to be the waitress. She grabbed the check folder for table 4. It was too early for the bill, but it was her only prop. Ilara pulled the receipt out. Her hand was shaking so bad she thought she'd tear the paper. She uncapped her red pen. She pretended to tally up items, leaning over the counter so her back blocked the gunman's view of her hands. She scanned the itemized list on the receipt. Grilled branzino, Pinot Noir, sparkling water, lava cake. She started circling letters. Grilled, menu, Pinot, mousse, asparagus, N, gunman. She worked frantically, her eyes darting to table 5. The accountant was screwing the silencer onto the barrel now, hidden beneath the tablecloth. He was taking his time. He wanted a clean shot to the back of the head. She circled the rest. BEHINDYOUEXITNOW. She didn't have time to spell deal gone wrong. She just wrote Deal X at the bottom in jagged, violent strokes. Ilara walked toward table 4. Her legs felt like lead. Don't look at the gunman. Don't look at the gunman. She reached Moretti's table. He didn't look up from his phone. Check, sir, she said. Her voice was breathless, tight. I didn't ask for the check, he said, his tone icy. I think there's a mistake with the order, she said, pushing the black leather folder directly over his phone screen. You need to look at it. Now. Something in her tone, maybe the sheer terror vibrating off her, made him stop. He looked up. His eyes met hers. For a second, she saw the predator behind the polish. He saw the sweat on her upper lip, the dilation of her pupils. Slowly, carefully, he looked down at the receipt. He saw the red circles. He saw the jagged Deal X. Lorenzo Moretti didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He didn't turn around. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a thick money clip, and threw a $100 bill on the table. Keep the change, he said loudly. Then he kicked the table. It was a violent, explosive movement. He drove his heel into the pedestal base of the heavy oak table, sending the entire thing crashing backward into the partition and into the gunman at table 5. Crack! The partition shattered. The gunman, caught mid-rise, was knocked backward, his shot going wild. Thwip crack. The bullet shattered the wine glass next to Ilara's hand. Shards of crystal sliced into her palm, but the adrenaline masked the pain. Move! Lorenzo roared. He lunged out of the booth, not away from the danger, but toward it. He vaulted over the wreckage of the table. The gunman was scrambling to get the weapon free from the tablecloth. Lorenzo didn't give him the chance. He landed a vicious right hook that sounded like a cleaver hitting meat. The gunman crumpled, but he wasn't alone. The front door of the obsidian burst open. 2 more men in raincoats stepped in, weapons raised. Lorenzo grabbed her arm. His grip was like iron. Kitchen! Now! He dragged her toward the swinging doors. Bullets chewed up the plaster where her head had been a second ago. Screams erupted in the dining room. They burst into the kitchen. The chefs were freezing, pans in hand. Out the back, Lorenzo commanded. He pulled a silver Sig Sauer from a holster at the small of his back that she hadn't even noticed. He fired 2 shots through the small window in the swinging door to suppress the pursuers. They hit the alleyway. The rain was torrential. It soaked her uniform instantly. Go left, he barked, shoving her toward the main street. Disappear. She turned to run. She should have run. But the back exit door flew open behind them. One of the gunmen had flanked them. He raised a shotgun. Lorenzo! She screamed. Lorenzo spun, but he was off balance on the slick cobblestones. She didn't think. She threw the heavy leather check folder she was still clutching. It hit the gunman square in the face. It wasn't much, but it made him blink. That split second was enough. Lorenzo fired. The gunman dropped. Lorenzo looked at the dead man, then at her. He looked furious. You're an idiot, he hissed. He grabbed her hand again. My car is armored. It's a block away. If you want to live, you run faster than you've ever run in your life. They ran into the night, the sirens wailing in the distance like a funeral song for the life she used to have. The car was a matte black Mercedes G-Wagon, idling in a no-parking zone. Lorenzo shoved Ilara into the passenger seat and slid behind the wheel. Buckle up, he ordered. As soon as he slammed the door, the muffled sounds of the city vanished. The glass was thick, bulletproof. He floored the gas. The engine roared like a beast waking up, and they peeled out into traffic, clipping the side mirror of a taxi. Ilara was hyperventilating. Her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't get the seatbelt to click. Breathe, Lorenzo said. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were scanning the mirrors, watching for a tail. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Do it. She forced air into her lungs. Who were they? Contractors. Russian by the look of the tattoos, he said calmly, as if discussing the weather. He took a sharp right, running a red light. The deal was a setup. Someone sold me out. He glanced at her then. The streetlights flickered over his face, casting long shadows. He looked at her hand. You're bleeding. She looked down. Blood was dripping from her palm onto her uniform skirt, the wine glass shards. It's fine, she stammered. Just glass. There's a med kit in the glove box. Wrap it. Don't get blood on the leather. She stared at him. I just saved your life. And you're worried about the upholstery? He let out a short, dry laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. I'm worried about DNA, ragazza. If you bleed in my car, and they find this car, they find you. And if they find you, they peel your skin off to ask you what you told me. A chill that had nothing to do with the rain went down her spine. She opened the glove box. Inside was a trauma kit that looked military grade, a stack of passports, and another magazine for his gun. She found some gauze and wrapped her hand tight. The pain was starting to throb now, a dull, hot ache. What is your name? He asked. Ilara. Ilara. Pretty name. Terrible survival instincts. I warned you, she snapped. The fear was turning into anger. I could have walked away. You circled letters on a bill, he said. Clever. Who taught you that? Most civilians would have screamed or frozen. She looked out the window. They were heading toward the bridges, leaving Manhattan. My father. He had debt. He taught me to spot collectors. And where is your father now? Dead, she said flatly. They caught him. The car went silent. Lorenzo slowed down slightly as they merged onto the highway. I can't take you home, he said after a minute. I have a cat, she said stupidly. I have to feed my cat. Your cat is fine. Your apartment, however, is probably already being watched. If Vargo, the man who likely hired those Russians, knows I escaped, he knows someone helped me. The staff at the restaurant will be questioned. They'll give a description. The brunette waitress with the scar on her chin. She touched her chin instinctively. A childhood bicycle accident. So I'm kidnapped? She asked. You're under protection, he corrected. Until I find out who leaked the meeting, you are a loose end. And I don't like loose ends. He pulled off the highway into an industrial district in Queens. Rows of warehouses stood like skeletal teeth against the night sky. He pulled the car into a nondescript garage, waiting for the heavy steel door to roll down behind them before killing the engine. The silence in the garage was deafening. Lorenzo turned in his seat to face her. The overhead light turned on. For the first time, she saw him clearly. He was devastatingly handsome, yes, but there was a weariness in his eyes, a deep, ancient exhaustion. There was also a smear of blood on his collar. You're hurt, she said, pointing to his neck. He touched it, wincing. Glass from the partition. It's nothing. It's close to the jugular, she observed. He narrowed his eyes. You a nurse, Ilara. Vet tech school dropout, she muttered. Couldn't afford the tuition? Well, fix it, he said, leaning his head back. There's antiseptic in the kit. She hesitated. This man was a killer. He was a Mafia boss. Everything she had spent her life running away from. And now, she was leaning over the center console of a bulletproof Mercedes, dabbing iodine onto his neck. He smelled like gunpowder and expensive cologne. His pulse was steady under her fingers. Too steady. "Why didn't you run?" he asked quietly, his eyes closed. "When the shooting started. Why throw the folder?" She paused, holding the gauze against his neck. "Because I saw the man's eyes," she whispered. "The gunman. He didn't just want to kill you. He was enjoying it. I hate bullies." Lorenzo opened his eyes. They were dark, intense, and focused entirely on her lips. "That wasn't a bully, Alara. That was a professional. And by saving me, you've made yourself a target for every ambitious hitman in the tri-state area." He grabbed her wrist, the uninjured one. His thumb brushed over her pulse point. "Welcome to the family," he said softly. "You're never getting out." Suddenly his phone buzzed. He released her and checked the screen. His expression hardened into granite. "Get out of the car," he commanded, grabbing his gun. "What? Why?" "Because," he said, exiting the vehicle and opening her door. "That text wasn't from my men. It was from Vargo. He knows we're here." Her stomach dropped. "How?" Lorenzo looked at the car. Then he looked at her. He ripped the dashboard apart with one hand, tearing out a bundle of wires behind the GPS screen. He found it. A small, blinking red chip. "My driver," he growled. "My driver planted a tracker." He grabbed her hand. "Run! To the back office. There's a hatch in the floor." "What about you?" He racked the slide of his gun. "I'm going to have a conversation with whoever comes through that door." "I'm not leaving you," she said. It surprised her as much as it surprised him. He looked at her, a flicker of something like respect, or maybe madness, in his eyes. "Then stay low," he said. "And if I tell you to shoot, you shoot." He handed her a backup pistol from his ankle holster. It was heavy, cold, and smelled of oil. The garage door began to shudder. Someone was ramming it from the outside. She gripped the gun with both hands. She was a waitress. She served pasta and poured wine. But tonight, standing in a damp garage with the devil of New York, she realized something. She wasn't just observing the world anymore. She was fighting back. The metal garage door screamed as a black SUV rammed it from the outside. The steel buckled inward, screeching like a dying animal. "Get behind the pillar," Lorenzo roared. Ilara scrambled behind a concrete support beam, clutching the gun with sweat-slicked hands. She had never fired a weapon in her life. It felt impossibly heavy, a cold, dead weight that promised nothing but destruction. The door gave way with a thunderous crash. The nose of a Range Rover punched through, headlights blinding them in the dusty gloom. Lorenzo didn't wait. He was calm, terrifyingly calm. He stood in the open, raised his Sig Sauer, and fired 3 rapid shots. Pop! 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 The windshield of the Range Rover spider-webbed. The driver slumped over the horn, creating a continuous, blaring drone that echoed off the concrete walls. "Move!" Lorenzo signaled. But the passenger door of the Range Rover flew open. A man in tactical gear rolled out, spraying submachine gun fire. Bullets chipped chunks of concrete off the pillar inches from her face. Dust and debris stung her eyes. She screamed, covering her head. "Ilara, shoot!" Lorenzo shouted from the other side of the room. He was pinned down behind a tool chest. She looked at the gun in her hand. She thought of her father, cowering in their kitchen while loan sharks broke their dishes. She thought of the years she spent being small, being quiet, being a ghost. Not tonight. She swung around the pillar. She didn't aim like they do in the movies. She just pointed the gun in the general direction of the tactical vest and pulled the trigger. The recoil was shocking. It jerked her arm back violently, and the sound was deafening. She missed the man by a yard, the bullet sparking off the floor. But it surprised him. He flinched, turning his weapon toward her. That was all Lorenzo needed. Lorenzo broke cover. Sliding across the hood of his own car, he fired once, a clean shot. The gunman dropped. Silence returned to the garage, broken only by the drone of the dead driver's horn. Lorenzo was at her side in a second. He grabbed the gun from her shaking hand and tucked it into his waistband. "You missed," he said, breathless. "I distracted him," she countered, her voice trembling uncontrollably. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. For a moment, the hard lines of his jaw softened. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, then pulled back. "Good enough," he said. "Let's go." They didn't take his car. It was tracked. They slipped out a side door into the alley. It was still pouring rain. They ran 3 blocks, cutting through backyards and climbing chain-link fences until they found an old Ford sedan parked in a driveway with the engine running. Someone warming up their car for a night shift. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. He smashed the window, unlocked the door, and hot-wired it before she could even process the felony. "Get in." They drove in silence for an hour, heading north, away from the city lights. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, aching shock. Her hand was throbbing. Her uniform was ruined. She was an accessory to murder. They ended up at a safe house in the Catskills. It wasn't a cabin. It was a fortress of glass and steel, cantilevered over a waterfall. It was beautiful and cold, just like him. Inside, Lorenzo disarmed the security system and collapsed onto a white leather sofa. He looked exhausted. The blood on his collar had dried into a dark crust. "First aid kit is in the bathroom," he rasped. "Kitchen is stocked. Don't use the phone. Don't turn on the TV." Ilara found the kit. She also found a bottle of whiskey. She brought both to the living room. "Shirt off," she said. He looked at her, one eyebrow raised. "At least buy me dinner first, Kara." "I saved your life twice tonight, Lorenzo. Take off the damn shirt." He smirked, but he complied. He unbuttoned the ruined dress shirt, wincing as he peeled the fabric away from the cut on his neck. She sucked in a breath. His torso was a map of violence. Old scars, knife wounds, bullet grazes. A tattoo of a wolf in mid-snarl covered his left pectoral, the ink dark and intricate. She poured whiskey on a cotton pad. "This is going to sting." "I have a high tolerance." She pressed the pad to his neck. He hissed, his hand gripping the sofa cushion until the leather creaked. "Liar," she whispered. She worked in silence, cleaning the wound and butterfly stripping it closed. She was close enough to smell him. Rain, musk, and the copper tang of blood. She could feel the heat radiating off his skin. When she finished, she pulled back, but he caught her hand. His grip was gentle this time. He looked at her palm, where the glass from the restaurant had cut her. "My turn," he said. He took the supplies from her. His movements were precise, surprisingly tender for a man who killed for a living. He cleaned her hand, wrapping it in fresh gauze. "Why do you have that scar?" he asked, looking at her chin. "The bicycle accident?" "I lied," she said softly. The whiskey was making her brave. "My father threw a bottle at me when I was 12. He missed, but it shattered against the wall. A shard caught me." Lorenzo stopped. His thumb brushed the faint white line on her jaw. His eyes darkened, a storm brewing in the iris. "He's dead?" Lorenzo asked. "Yes." "Good." The word hung in the air, heavy, final. "Why do they call you the Wolf?" she asked, changing the subject. He finished bandaging her hand and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He downed it in one swallow. "Because when I was young, my father told me there are 2 types of men in this world. The sheep, who wait to be slaughtered, and the wolves, who do the slaughtering. He wanted me to be a wolf." He looked at the fireless hearth. "He didn't tell me that wolves are usually the loneliest things in the forest." He stood up abruptly, the moment of vulnerability snapping shut like a steel trap. "Take the guest room. Lock the door. We have work to do tomorrow." "Work?" she asked, standing up. "I'm going to the police, Lorenzo." He laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "The police? Vargo owns half the precinct. You walk into a station, you don't walk out. You're in this now, Elara. The only way out is through." He walked toward the master bedroom, pausing at the door. "Sleep well, Waitress. Tomorrow, we hunt." Elara didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the gunman's face. She saw the blood. She heard the crunch of the table hitting bone. By 6 a.m., she gave up. She found a heavy knit sweater in the closet that smelled like cedar and Lorenzo, pulled it over her ruined uniform, and went into the main room. Lorenzo was already up. He was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by stacks of files, 3 burner phones, and a laptop. He looked like he hadn't slept either. He was wearing a fresh black t-shirt that hugged his arms, his hair still damp from a shower. "Coffee," he said, without looking up, pointing to a pot in the kitchen. "I'm not your waitress right now," she muttered, but she poured 2 cups anyway. She needed the caffeine. She set the mug down in front of him. He was staring at a spreadsheet on the laptop screen, his brow furrowed. "What is that?" she asked, looking over his shoulder. "The reason someone wants me dead," he said, rubbing his temples. "Before the dinner, I downloaded Vargo's shipping ledger from a secure server. I thought it would prove he's moving product through my territory, but it's nonsense, just random dates and shipping container numbers. No patterns." She looked at the screen. Rows of numbers. Dates. Weights. 10-12-23. CNT 4920. 4500 Corridor 423. CNT 3310. 2200 clause. Her brain did that thing it always did. The thing that made her good at word puzzles. The thing that made her notice the gunman's reflection. It reorganized chaos into order. "It's not random," she said. Lorenzo paused, the mug halfway to his lips. "Excuse me?" "The container numbers," she said, pointing. "Look at the second digit of each container ID. 9317. She grabbed a notepad and a pen. She wrote down the second digit of the first 10 entries. 9317052 "So?" Lorenzo asked. "It's still random." "No," she said, her pulse picking up. "It's a substitution cipher. My dad, he used to use these to hide gambling bets in his grocery lists." She looked at the dates. "If you correlate these numbers to the alphabet, 1 is A, 2 is B." She worked quickly. Lorenzo watched her, his intensity shifting from annoyance to fascination. "It spells a location," she whispered. She wrote the letters out. Pierrnine. "Pier 9, Lorenzo read aloud. His voice was low, dangerous. "That's my territory, my family's private dock." "There's more," she said. She kept decoding. The next set of numbers didn't spell a word. They were a time, 0300. "3 entre les," Lorenzo said. "Tonight." And the last part. She circled the final column. "The weights. They don't match the container sizes. If you take the difference..." She did the math. The remainders weren't random. They were coordinates. But not for a ship. For a bank account. "Someone is skimming off Vargo's shipments and moving the money through your docks to frame you," she realized. "Lorenzo, Vargo isn't just trying to kill you for territory. He thinks you stole from him." Lorenzo stood up slowly. The air in the room grew heavy. "I didn't steal from him," he said. "Which means someone inside my organization did. Someone used my docks to steal from the Russians, and now the Russians are coming for me." He walked to the window, looking out at the waterfall. "Only 3 people have the clearance codes for Pier 9. My brother, Matteo, my capo, Silas, and my lawyer." "Who do you trust?" she asked. He turned back to her. The wolf was back. His eyes were cold, calculating, devoid of the softness she had seen the night before. In this life, Elara, trust is a liability. But I know how to find out. He grabbed one of the burner phones. We're going back to the city. What? You said it's a death trap. It is, he agreed. But tonight at 3 a.m. at Pier 9, the traitor is going to be there to meet the shipment, and I intend to introduce myself. He walked over to her. He placed his hands on the table, leaning in until their faces were inches apart. You cracked the code, Elara. You found the leak, which means you're the most valuable asset I have right now. Is that all I am? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. An asset? He looked at her lips, then up to her eyes. The tension was electric, a physical pull that made her knees weak. No, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. You're also the only person in the last 10 years who hasn't lied to me. He pulled away before she could respond. Get dressed. There are clothes in the guest closet. Something black. Something easy to run in. We're running again? No, Lorenzo said, picking up his gun and checking the chamber. Tonight we're not running. Tonight, we end it. She went to the room to change. She found a pair of black cargo pants and a fitted tactical jacket that must have belonged to a woman. A past lover? A female assassin? She didn't want to know. When she came out, Lorenzo was waiting by the door. He tossed her a set of keys. You drive. What? I need to make calls, and I need my hands free in case we get company. You know how to drive a stick shift? I drove a 1998 Corolla for 5 years, she said, snatching the keys. I can handle whatever you have. He opened the garage of the safe house. Inside sat a vintage Mustang, matte grey, looking like a shark on wheels. Don't scratch it, he warned. As they roared out of the driveway, heading back toward the concrete jungle of New York, Elara realized her life as a waitress was over. She wasn't serving tables anymore. She was sitting next to the king of the underworld, driving into a war zone. And God help her, she wasn't scared anymore. She was ready. The drive back to the city felt like a funeral procession. The vintage Mustang ate up the asphalt, the engine purring with a deep, throaty rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Elara drove. Lorenzo sat in the passenger seat, cleaning his gun. Again. It was a ritual for him, a way to impose order on chaos. You're quiet, he said, the first word spoken in 20 miles. I'm driving a stolen car with a Mafia boss to a drug deal, she said, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. I'm trying to focus on not vomiting. Lorenzo chuckled softly. You have steady hands, Elara. You drive better than my actual driver, the one who betrayed me. What are you going to do? She asked. When we get there, if it is your brother or your best friend. Lorenzo stopped cleaning the gun. He looked out the window at the passing skyline of New York, glittering like a pile of diamonds on black velvet. My father had a rule, he said, his voice distant. Loyalty is binary. It's a 1 or a 0. You are loyal or you are dead. There is no partial credit. That sounds lonely, she said. It is. He turned to her. But it keeps you alive. They parked the Mustang a mile away from Pier 9, under an overpass where the shadows were deep enough to hide them. They walked the rest of the way. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with fog, smelling of salt water, rotting fish, and diesel fuel. Pier 9 was a massive industrial complex. Mountains of shipping containers were stacked 5 high, creating a rusted steel labyrinth. Huge cranes loomed overhead like skeletal dinosaurs. Stay close, Lorenzo whispered. Follow my footsteps. Watch the corners. They moved like ghosts. Lorenzo moved with a predatory grace, silent and sure. She followed, trying to remember everything she'd learned about being invisible in a crowded restaurant. Don't scuff your heels. Breathe through your mouth. Become part of the background. They reached a vantage point, a metal catwalk running along the side of a warehouse, overlooking the main loading dock. Below them, under the harsh glare of halogen floodlights, stood the container from the ledger. CNT 4920. It was open. 2 men were standing by the doors. Russians. She recognized the tattoos on their necks. They were holding assault rifles, looking bored. "Vargo's men," Lorenzo whispered, his lips brushing her ear. She shivered, but not from the cold. "Where is the traitor?" She breathed back. "Wait." 5 minutes passed. Then, headlights cut through the fog. A black Audi sedan rolled onto the pier. It stopped 10 yards from the container. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a camel hair coat that looked impeccable even in this grime. He had the same dark hair as Lorenzo, the same sharp nose. Lorenzo stiffened beside her. She felt his entire body turn into a block of ice. "No," he breathed, a sound of pure devastation. It was Matteo, his younger brother. "Matteo," Lorenzo whispered. The name sounded like a curse. Matteo walked up to the Russians. He didn't look scared. He looked arrogant. He shook hands with the lead Russian. "Is it all here?" Matteo asked. His voice drifted up to the catwalk, clear in the damp air. "All of it," the Russian replied. "Cash is in the trunk. The product is in the container. Vargo sends his regards." "Vargo can keep his regards," Matteo sneered. "Just tell him the deal is done. Lorenzo is gone. The city is ours to split." Lorenzo's hand gripped the railing of the catwalk so hard the metal groaned. "He sold me," Lorenzo said, his voice void of emotion. "My own blood. He sold me for half a city." "What do we do?" Ilara asked. Lorenzo pulled the Sig Sauer. He checked the magazine. "I go down there. I end it." "There are 6 of them, Lorenzo, and they have automatic weapons. You have a pistol and, well, me. And I have a fruit knife I found in your glove box." "I don't have a choice, Ilara." "Yes, you do," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "Use your head, the one that runs the business. Look at them." She pointed down. The Russians aren't relaxing. Their fingers are on the triggers. They're glancing at the shadows. They aren't here to partner with Matteo. They're here to clean house. Lorenzo looked. He squinted. He saw what she saw, the subtle shift in body language, the way the Russians were fanning out, flanking Matteo. "They're going to kill him," Lorenzo realized, as soon as he hands over the access codes. "Matteo is a traitor," she said, "but he's your brother. Do you want him dead?" Lorenzo looked at her. The conflict in his eyes was a storm, anger, betrayal, and a deep, reluctant love. "No," he said. "Then we need a distraction," she said. She looked around the catwalk. Her eyes landed on a control panel about 20 feet away. It was labeled Crane 4, Override. "Can you shoot out the lights?" she asked. "I can shoot the wings off a fly at 50 yards. "Okay," she said. "When I signal, you kill the lights. I'm going to drop the boom." "Ilara, that's dangerous. If they see you, they won't," she said, forcing a confidence she didn't feel. "I'm the waitress. I'm invisible, remember?" She didn't wait for his permission. She crawled along the grate, keeping low. The rusted metal bit into her knees. Below, the conversation was getting heated. "Give us the codes, Moretti," the Russian growled. "Money first," Matteo demanded. The Russian raised his rifle slightly. She reached the control panel. It was an old industrial lever system. She found the release brake for the massive hook hanging directly above the black Audi. She looked back at Lorenzo. He was aiming at the floodlights. He gave her a sharp nod. She gripped the lever. 1, 2, 3. She yanked the lever down with all her weight. At the exact same moment, Lorenzo fired. Pop! 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 The floodlights exploded in a shower of sparks and glass. The pier plunged into darkness. Simultaneously, the hydraulic brake on the crane hissed, and the massive steel hook, weighing 2 tons, dropped from the sky. Crunch. It smashed into the roof of the Audi, flattening the car like a soda can. The impact shook the entire pier. "Ambush!" someone screamed in Russian. "Move!" Lorenzo roared from the darkness. Chaos erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the fog like strobe lights. Bullets pinged off the metal containers. Ilara stayed low, scrambling back toward Lorenzo. But he was already moving. He wasn't running away. He was running down the stairs, straight into the kill zone. "Idiot!" she screamed, and she ran after him. The loading dock was a nightmare of noise and confusion. The only light came from the muzzle flashes and the headlights of the crushed Audi, which were flickering erratically. Lorenzo moved through the maze of crates like a wraith. He fired twice, dropping a Russian who was trying to flank the stairs. "Matteo!" Lorenzo shouted. His voice was a thunderclap over the gunfire. "Get down!" Matteo was standing in the open, looking wildly around, a silver pistol in his hand that he clearly didn't know how to use. He looked like a lost child. "Lorenzo," Matteo stammered, squinting into the dark. "You're dead." "Not yet." Lorenzo tackled his brother, just as a spray of bullets chewed up the asphalt where Matteo had been standing. They rolled behind a stack of pallets. Lorenzo grabbed Matteo by the lapels of his expensive coat and slammed him against a crate. "You sold me out!" Lorenzo roared, spitting in his face. "To Vargo? To the butchers?" "I had to," Matteo screamed back, tears and snot mixing on his face. "You were never going to step down. I was always just the little brother. I wanted the chair, Enzo. I wanted respect." "You wanted respect?" Lorenzo backhanded him. "Look around you. They were going to put a bullet in your head the second you gave them the codes. You aren't a boss, Matteo. You're a loose end. Watch out!" Ilara screamed. She was crouching behind a forklift about 10 yards away. A Russian had climbed onto top of the shipping container above the brothers. He had the high ground. Lorenzo looked up, but he was too slow. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She just acted. Ilara scrambled into the driver's seat of the forklift. It was an old propane model. The keys were zip-tied to the column, standard practice on busy docks. She twisted them. The engine roared to life. She slammed the gear into reverse and floored it. The forklift shot backward, slamming into the stack of crates the Russian was standing on. The impact was massive. The tower of crates wobbled and tipped. The Russian screamed as he lost his footing, tumbling 15 feet down to the concrete. He hit with a sickening thud and didn't move. Lorenzo looked at her, eyes wide. "Nice driving. Less talking, more shooting," she yelled. But the fight wasn't over. The lead Russian, the one with the scars, stepped out from behind the crushed Audi. He was holding something that wasn't a rifle. It was a grenade launcher. "Goodbye, Moretti," he laughed. "Run." Lorenzo grabbed Matteo and shoved him toward a gap in the containers. He dove toward Ilara, tackling her out of the forklift, just as the Russian pulled the trigger. Boom. The explosion was deafening. The forklift vanished in a ball of fire. The shockwave threw them through the air. Ilara hit the ground hard. The wind knocked out of her. Her ears were ringing. The world was spinning. She tried to sit up. The air was thick with black smoke. "Lorenzo!" She coughed. He was lying a few feet away, groaning. He had shielded her with his body. The back of his tactical jacket was shredded, smoking. "Enzo!" She crawled to him. He rolled over, his face streaked with soot and blood. He gritted his teeth. "I'm okay, Kevlar." He sat up, wincing. "Where is Matteo?" They looked. Matteo was standing near the edge of the pier. He was unhurt. He was looking at them. Then he looked at the water. There was a speedboat tied up at the end of the dock, the getaway vehicle. "Matteo, help us!" Lorenzo called out. Matteo looked at his brother. Then he looked at the burning forklift. Then he looked at the Russian leader, who was reloading his launcher. Matteo made a choice. He turned and ran for the boat. "I'm sorry, Enzo," he screamed over his shoulder. "I can't die here." Lorenzo's face crumbled. It was a look of pure heartbreak. The betrayal of the sail was one thing, the abandonment was another. "Coward," Lorenzo whispered. The Russian leader leveled the launcher at them. They were sitting ducks. Lorenzo was hurt. His gun was jammed with debris. Elara had nothing but her hands. "This is it," Lorenzo said. He reached for her hand. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this, Elara." She squeezed his hand. "I circled the words," she said. "I chose this." The Russian smiled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Bang! A single shot rang out. It didn't come from them. The Russian's head snapped back. A red mist sprayed into the fog. He crumpled to the ground, the launcher clattering uselessly on the concrete. They froze. At the end of the pier, standing on the prow of the speedboat, was Matteo. He was holding his pistol with both hands, smoke drifting from the barrel. He hadn't started the engine. He had turned back. He looked at Lorenzo across the distance. He looked terrified, but his jaw was set. "I'm not a zero," Matteo shouted, his voice cracking. Then 3 more Russians emerged from the shadows behind Matteo. "Matteo, look out!" Lorenzo screamed, struggling to stand. It was too late. The Russians opened fire on the boat. Matteo jerked as the bullets hit him. 1, 2, 3 times. He fell backward, over the railing, into the dark, churning water of the Hudson River. "No!" Lorenzo's scream tore his throat. The grief seemed to power him. He ignored his injuries. He ignored the pain. He snatched the backup pistol from Elara's waistband, the one she had barely used, and stood up. He was the wolf now. Pure, unadulterated rage. He walked toward the remaining Russians. He didn't take cover. He just walked and fired. Bang, bang, bang. Every shot was a kill. Head, heart, throat. He was a machine of death. The Russians didn't stand a chance. Within 10 seconds, silence fell over Pier 9, broken only by the crackle of the burning forklift and the lap of the water against the pilings. Lorenzo reached the edge of the dock. He dropped to his knees, staring into the black water where his brother had fallen. "Matteo," he whispered. There was no surface, no splashing, just the dark current pulling everything out to sea. Elara walked up behind him. She placed a hand on his shoulder. He was trembling violently. "He came back," she said softly. "In the end, he chose you." Lorenzo lowered his head. "He saved us, and I couldn't save him." Sirens wailed in the distance. They were getting louder. The explosion had woken the city. "We have to go," she said. "Lorenzo, we have to go now." He didn't move for a long moment. Then he took a deep, shuddering breath. He stood up. He looked older, harder. "Yes," he said, "we have to go." He turned to her. He took her face in his blood-stained hands. He kissed her then. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, tasting of smoke and tears and survival. It was a promise and a plea. "Vargo is next," he said against her lips. "Tonight, the brother died. Tomorrow, the king dies." They ran back to the shadows, leaving the carnage and the ghosts behind them. Revenge is not a straight line. It is a circle. And appropriately enough, it brought Elara right back to where she started, wearing a black uniform, holding a tray of champagne, and being invisible. 3 days had passed since Pier 9. 3 days since they watched Matteo disappear into the dark water. Lorenzo hadn't spoken much. He had turned into stone, cold, hard, and unbreakable. But she saw the cracks. She saw the way his hand trembled when he thought she wasn't looking. They knew where Dante Vargo was. He was celebrating. He was hosting a charity gala at the top of the Vargo Tower in Manhattan. It was a victory lap. He thought Lorenzo was dead. He thought the city was his. "You don't have to do this," Lorenzo had said an hour ago, adjusting the earpiece in her ear. They were in a van 2 blocks away. "You can walk away. I have a plane ticket waiting for you. Paris. You can start over." She had looked at him, adjusting the white apron around her waist. "I told you, Lorenzo, I don't run anymore. Besides, you need someone on the inside to disable the elevators, and nobody notices the help." Now she was inside. The penthouse was dripping with gold and excess. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The room was filled with the city's elite, judges, politicians, and mobsters in tuxedos, pretending to be civilized. She moved through the crowd, offering champagne. "More bubbly, sir?" "Thank you, sweetheart." They didn't look at her face. They never did. She spotted Vargo. He was holding court near the floor-to-ceiling windows, laughing with a group of men. He looked like a reptile in a suit, slick, oily, and cold. Standing next to him was the new representative for the Russian syndicate, a man named Sokolov. She adjusted her tray. This was the moment. She tapped her earpiece twice. Signal sent. Down in the lobby, Lorenzo would be entering, but he couldn't get up here until she overrode the security lockout on the private elevator. She slipped away from the party, heading toward the service corridor. A guard blocked the way. "Kitchen staff only," he grunted. "The boss asked for the 1982 vintage," she said, holding up an empty bottle she had snagged. "It's in the cellar. Unless you want to tell Mr. Vargo why his toast is dry." The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. "Make it quick." She walked into the service hallway. As soon as she was out of sight, she dropped the bottle. She ran to the security panel on the wall. It was biometric, but Lorenzo had given her a cloned keycard from one of the men he'd killed at the pier. She swiped it. The light turned green. She typed in the override code, WOLF. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Lorenzo stepped out. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a tactical vest over a black shirt, holding an AR-15. He looked like the angel of death. Behind him were 4 men, loyalists who had come out of hiding when they heard the wolf was still alive. "Showtime," Lorenzo said. They walked back into the main hall together. The music stopped. The chatter died. One by one, heads turned. Dante Vargo froze, his champagne glass halfway to his mouth. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Lorenzo," Vargo whispered. The color drained from his face. "Dante," Lorenzo said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You're sitting in my chair." The guards started to reach for their weapons, but Lorenzo's men already had laser sights trained on their foreheads. "Nobody moves," Lorenzo barked. "This is between me and him." Vargo tried to laugh, but it came out as a squeak. "You can't kill me here, Lorenzo. There are witnesses, senators, judges." "They won't see anything," Lorenzo said, "because they know what happens to people who see too much." The crowd instinctively backed away, forming a wide circle around the 2 men. "You're a relic, Lorenzo," Vargo sneered, trying to regain his composure. "The Russians back me. They know I'm the future." "Do they?" Ilara spoke up. Vargo turned to her, blinking. "Who is this? The caterer?" She stepped forward, pulling a folded piece of paper from her apron. It was the deciphered ledger, the one she had cracked in the safe house. "Mr. Sokolov," she said, addressing the Russian representative. "You might want to read this before you defend him." She handed the paper to the Russian. "What is this?" Sokolov asked, his accent thick. "Proof," she said. proof that Vargo has been skimming 20% off your shipments for the last 2 years. He didn't sell Lorenzo out because of territory. He did it to frame Lorenzo for his own theft. Vargo lunged at her. "Give me that!" Lorenzo was faster. He pistol-whipped Vargo across the face. Vargo crumpled to the floor, bleeding. Sokolov read the paper. His face went purple. He looked at the bank coordinates she had decoded. He pulled out his phone, made a 10-second call, and then hung up. He looked at Vargo with pure disgust. "The accounts are real," Sokolov said. "He stole from the Vor." The Russian looked at Lorenzo. He nodded once. "He is yours." Sokolov signaled his men, and they walked out of the room, leaving Vargo alone. Vargo scrambled backward on the expensive marble floor. "Enzo, please. We're family. I can explain." "Family?" Lorenzo asked quietly. He stepped closer, the barrel of his rifle pointing at the floor. "My brother is at the bottom of the Hudson because of you. He was a traitor, yes, but he was my blood. And you used him like a pawn." Lorenzo looked at Ilara. He held out his hand. She walked over to him. He handed her a gun, a small silver pistol. "You started this," Lorenzo said softly. "You circled the words. You saved my life. You earned the right to finish it." She looked at the gun. Then she looked at Vargo. He was pathetic now, weeping, begging. She thought about the fear she had lived in for years, the fear of men like her father, the fear of men like Vargo. She realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She walked up to Vargo. She leaned down. "Table for one," she whispered. She didn't shoot him. She stood up and handed the gun back to Lorenzo. "He's not worth the bullet, Enzo," she said, loudly enough for the room to hear. "Let the police have him. Let him rot in a cell knowing he lost everything to a waitress." Lorenzo looked at her, surprised. Then a slow, dark smile spread across his face. "You're right," he said. He turned to the crowd. "Everyone out. Party's over." As the guests scrambled for the exits, sirens began to wail below. She had called them 10 minutes ago. Lorenzo holstered his weapon. He walked over to her, ignoring Vargo, who was now sobbing into the carpet. He took her face in his hands. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only the heat between them. "You didn't take the shot," he said. "I don't need to be a killer to be strong," she said. "No," he agreed. "You're something more dangerous. You're the one who holds the leash." He kissed her. It was deep, possessive, and final. It was a seal on a contract written in blood and red ink. "So," he murmured against her lips, "Paris is still an option? Or we stay," he said. "We rebuild, and we rule this city, together." Ilara looked out the window at the skyline of New York. It was beautiful. It was dangerous. It was theirs. "I think I'm done serving tables," she said, smiling. "I'm ready to sit at the head of one." Lorenzo Moretti, the Wolf of New York, laughed. He took her hand and led her out of the penthouse, leaving the wreckage of his enemy behind them. The waitress was gone. The Queen had arrived, and this time she didn't need to check for the exit, and that is how Ilara Vance went from circling typos on a menu to circling the names of her enemies. She saved the wolf, lost her innocence, but found her power. They say that in the Mafia there are no happy endings, only survivors. But looking at Ilara and Lorenzo, standing at the top of the world, I think they found something better than happiness. They found an equal. Now, I have a question for you. If you were Ilara, if you saw the gun in the reflection, would you have kept your head down? Or would you have picked up the red pen? Let me know in the comments what you would have written on that receipt. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It helps more than you know. subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss next week's story, where we dive into a forbidden romance between a detective and the thief he's sworn to catch. Thanks for watching, and remember, check your exits. You never know who's sitting behind you.